Chapter 1. On Tuesday afternoon at 5:30, an elderly lady strode into Corin's antique store as if she owned it and said, "The next 2 months of your life will be either heaven or hell." The corners of her mouth turned up a fraction. It was almost a smile. "Excuse me?" Corin Roscoe stared at her over the mound of bills in front of him and stifled a laugh. White hair, deep smile lines etched into her high cheekbones. She had to be at least mid-70s, maybe 80, but she moved like she was in her 40s. She wore a dark tan coat that bounced off her calves as she strolled toward Corin, ice blue eyes full of laughter. She didn't look crazy. "I've brought you the chair, you see." She stared at him as if that statement would explain everything. Corin brushed his dark hair off his forehead and slid off the stool behind his sales counter. "What chair?" The woman looked around the store like a school teacher evaluating a new classroom of students. Her eyes seemed to settle on the pile of precisely stacked books from the 1700s. "I love books, you know." Something about her was familiar. "Do I know you?" He took a step toward the woman. "No." Her laugh had a tinge of music in it. "I hardly think so." "You're sure?" "Yes." "You're a fortune teller, right? And think a little heaven and a little hell is coming my way. Can't I just subscribe to your newsletter?" She drew a circle in the air with her forefinger, cherry red nail polish flashing under the halogen lights of Corin's antique store. "Probably an interweaving of the two realms. And I believe you'll discover the hope of restoration. The final outcome will, of course, be your choice." Corin smiled. "You know, people think I'm a little crazy because of what I do for fun, but I don't think I have anything on you." She didn't react, only stared at him, utter confidence in her eyes. The lady had a sophisticated air about her in contrast with her odd proclamation. Since opening the store in his late 20s, Corin had entertained 7 years of the occasional strange customer. But this lady was more than unusual. Her confidence and striking looks made her words almost believable. "You need it." "I think this is the moment where you tell me who you are, or I kindly ask you to leave." The woman gazed out the windows toward Silva's ski shop across the street. "It is with regret that I cannot do that yet, but be assured, eventually I will." The hint of a smile returned. "Now, I must be going, so if you could help me get the chair inside, I will extend you great appreciation." She motioned toward the front door of the store. "It isn't heavy, but we will want to be careful. It is priceless." Just outside the door, a tan sheet covered what must be the chair the lady referred to. She stared at Corin, waiting, as if there were a contest going on to see who would drop their eyes first. "I didn't order a chair." Corin opened his palms. "Sorry. And wouldn't you know it, I'm overstocked with them this month already." He smiled. "Thanks anyway." "Listen to me." She intertwined her fingers, brought her thumbs up under her chin, and pointed her forefingers at him. "Okay," Corin chuckled. "This is a very special chair." "I'm sure it is." Corin cocked his head and winked. "Don't mock me." Her eyes locked onto his. Corin took half a step back. If her eyes were lasers, smoke would already be curling skyward above his lifeless body. "My apologies. I'm sure your chair is exceptional, but my warehouse on the east edge of town is full of antique chairs that have collected dust for over 6 months. There isn't a big demand for chairs in my store right now." Corin studied the lady. The lines carved into her light skin hinted of joy and pain, both in full measure. Her eyes, fire a moment ago, had softened and spoke of compassion and longing. Would it hurt to help her a bit? "If you have any desks, I'll take a look at those. I could buy 2 or 3, maybe more depending on their condition. And I can take the chair on consignment if you like, no charge whatsoever to display it." She looked at Corin as if observing a small child. You've misunderstood. I'm not asking you to buy the chair. I am giving it to you. Why would you do that? You are to have it. She motioned again toward the door. I am? Corin slid his hands into his jeans and eased toward the woman. Who made that decision? She stared at him and gave a faint smile, but didn't answer. And what if I don't want this gift? You do. She closed her eyes and bowed her head for a few seconds. What was she doing, praying? You will. You seem confident of that. Most certainly. It is a stunning piece. She looked down, laid a finger on the edge of a 19th century French walnut side table to her right, and drew her finger slowly across the wood. It was made by the most talented tecton craftsman the world has ever known. And who would that be? You'll figure it out, Corin. She looked back up at him, the knowing smile back on her face. I believe in you. He didn't need to figure it out. He needed to get back to figuring out how he would keep the bank from saying, "Thank you very much. The few items from centuries past that you still have in your possession are now ours." The lady continued to stare at him. It was obvious she wouldn't leave till she got what she wanted. And what would it hurt? Free? The price was right. And if it was hideous, he could use it in the fire pit in his backyard. Or give it away as a white elephant Christmas gift in a little over 2 months. Okay, you win. Corin grinned. How about I take a look at it and tell you what I think? Of course. She stepped outside to get the chair, and a burst of cool autumn air swirled through the front door. Colorado Springs was normally in the low 60s this time of year, but it felt more like mid-50s today. Corin followed her out. Here, let me get it. Thin twine ran up and over the sheet that covered the chair, and around its sides holding it in place. He leaned over, grabbed the arms of the chair, and immediately felt a mild shock, like he'd shuffled his feet double time on carpet, then touched something metal. Wow! Corin stumbled back a step and rubbed his fingers. Are you all right? Fine, just a little, electric shock. He leaned over and picked up the chair. I see. She raised her right eyebrow. The woman held open the store door for Corin as he carried it inside. She strode to a spot near his picture window that faced the street and motioned toward the floor with her hands in a big circle. Here, it should go here. Corin set the chair down and stepped back. With a miniature pocket knife, the woman cut the twine and let it tumble to the floor, then grabbed the middle of the sheet covering the chair. Ready? Sure. Corin held back a smile. He almost expected her to play a piece of classical music before pulling off the sheet. The lady glanced at him, then uncovered the chair as if she were revealing a glass-blown unicorn from 17th century Venice. Corin wasn't sure what he was expecting, but it wasn't this. Most talented craftsman the world has ever known? Certainly not for this piece. Describing it as plain would be generous. The only thing intriguing about the chair was the age. It looked older than any antique he'd ever seen. Made of olive wood, most likely. He strolled toward the chair, then circled it. His first assessment was wrong. As he studied it longer, he realized its minimalism masked a complex beauty. Interesting. And its finish was... He didn't know. He'd never seen one like it before, almost a translucent gold. He stepped forward and rubbed his finger along its back. Again, a tingling sensation ran through his fingers, lighter this time, as if he'd stuck his finger in an electrical socket with a minimal current flowing through it. But the feeling wasn't painful. It was almost warm and tinged with energy. An instant later he felt refreshed, as if he'd just taken a 20-minute power nap. He pulled his hand back and rubbed his thumb and fingers together. Strange. He turned to the woman. Did you feel something when you touched the chair? Yes. What? Like electricity and energy. She nodded, as if she expected his answer, and wanted him to continue speaking. What did I feel? It's a very special chair. Why is it special? Why did it do that to me? I hope you find out, but that will, of course, be your choice. She eased over to it and placed both her hands on top of its back and slowly slid them down the sides as she knelt. The woman sighed and again bowed her head. Where did it come from? Who made it? She stood. I told you, a craftsman. His name? She kept speaking, as if she hadn't heard him. Who lived long ago. What was his name? She looked up. It's not important right now. In time it will be. So give this the time it needs. She smiled, Julia Roberts wide, then turned and walked toward the front door of his store. You're leaving? I'm sorry, Corin. I must. I'd like to ask you a few more questions about this chair. I would like that. Great. Corin pulled out his cell phone and punched up his calendar. When can we set a time to... I am sorry. I have to go now. The lady put her hand on the doorknob. Corin walked toward her. Do you have a card? No. And if I want to reach you? Don't worry, my dear Corin. I will be in touch. I am very curious to see how this whole drama turns out. How do you know my name? You are sharp, aren't you? She laughed. There isn't much you miss, I imagine. You aren't going to tell me? No, not right now. She opened the door and stepped through it, then turned. Oh, and Corin? Yes? Don't worry about sitting in the chair till you're ready. She strolled away and faded into the late afternoon sun. Corin closed his front door and stared at it till the bells on it went silent. This one deserved a page in the manuscript of his book, Strange Antiques, Stranger Customers. Maybe a whole chapter. He shook his head and sighed. When he was her age, he hoped his eccentricity would be more self-contained than what he'd just witnessed. Corin spun on his heel and eased back to the chair. Had he really felt something? No question. And it wasn't a buildup of electricity on his carpet, since his floors were made of ash hardwood. He reached out, like he was sneaking up on a butterfly, and stopped, with only centimeters between the tip of his forefinger and the chair. After sucking in a deep breath and holding it for 10 seconds, he let it out slowly as he leaned slightly forward and touched the chair. Nothing. He ran his fingers up and down the sides and along the edges of the seat. This time there was no sensation. Did he imagine it? He'd been positive a moment ago. Corin trudged back toward his 6-by-6-foot office, past the sales counter, which had been sleepy for far too long, and slumped into one of the 19th century Black Harvest stenciled Hitchcock chairs he'd restored 4 months back. 2 years ago, the chair would have brought him a $1,500 profit on a bad day. Now it seemed to be nothing more than a conversation piece for the curious window shoppers who wanted to dream of older, better days, when the world wasn't filled with chaos, but who didn't feel a need to sacrifice any coin of the realm to acquire it for their homes. Better days. A distant memory professionally, an ancient memory personally. Corin opened his desk drawer and stared at the framed 8-by-10 picture resting on top of a thick stack of photos. 2 men in their mid-20s, on street luges, screamed around a corner at 70 miles an hour, in matching black and red leather coats, inches from the ground, one thumb up and grins beneath their helmets. At least he thought Shasta had been smiling. Corin had been. His brother had signed the shot, just like they signed all their photos documenting their abundant adventures. And they'd added the caption, "To insanity and beyond." That had been their catchphrase, inspired by seeing Toy Story when they were teenagers. Buzz might go to infinity and beyond. Their taste for extreme sports had taken them farther. Too far. Corin closed his eyes, tossed the photo back into the drawer, and slammed it shut. Never again. No more riding the thermals up to 17,000 feet on their hang gliders. No more flinging themselves 30 feet into the air on their dirt bikes. No more rappelling into caves they might never climb out of. All thanks to Corin Roscoe. His cell phone shattered the moment, and he pushed the pain from his mind. Good. Time to get back to the present. Hello? Cor, it's Robin. Hey, how are you? Corin shook his head. Speak of the devil, and Shasta's strawberry blonde wife ends up on the phone a few seconds later. Good. You? Fine. Can I ask a favor, Cor? Anything, you know that. I know, but only if it won't cut into any other plans you might have. What do you need? I have buyers who have been looking at one of my listings who are willing to sign up right now, and I don't want to lose this one. And I need someone to pick up my favorite nephew. Yes. That means I'd have to drop him off at your house. Corin opened the drawer and stared at the photo again. Yes, Robin sighed. Which means I would probably have to go inside to make sure. Don't go inside. He's been working on a big case, and he's due in court next week, and I know. You don't have to make excuses. Corin pushed the drawer with his pinky finger and watched it slide shut with a soft click. It was only an idea. Not a good one. When would it ever be good? Corin tried to swallow the regret, but it stuck in his throat. I'll leave right now. Thanks. She took a long breath. And Cor? Yeah? Have faith. This life isn't over yet. Shasta could still come around. Corin hung up, glanced at his calendar, then his watch, and swore. Tori's class would start in 20 minutes. There was no way he could pick up Sawyer from his pee-wee football practice, drop him off at his brother's house, and get to Tori's class on time. This would be the third time this month he showed up after she'd started. Tori rarely complained about it, even though he often saw the frustration in her eyes. She always said, don't worry about it, that she had her faults too, but he did worry about it. Women like her were as rare as the 1876 Winchester Deluxe rifle, sitting inside the locked vault, hidden at the back of his store. After dropping off Sawyer and waiting till he stepped inside his brother's 6,000-square-foot home, Corin glanced at his watch and mashed his gas pedal. No problem. He didn't have to be late for Tori's class. If he could average 95 miles per hour across town, he'd make it just in time.